Here's a conversation from Claire Robertson, and she describes her path through this murky world of persistent pain that is never linear. There's always ups and downs and setbacks and challenges, uh, frustrations and fears that you can never get through it and it's never going to change. But she's made some amazing progress, and this is her story, and she continues to improve, and she outlines how she's got to that point, where she is today, and maybe you can take some inspiration for yourself from her story. Right. So, Claire, thanks for joining me. These chats that we've had with people are helpful to others who maybe are somewhere along their recovery path, or might be starting it, or it reaffirms the possibility that people can recover through different processes to recover from persistent pain. So you are doing some things have changed for you. So just explain what your entry point was to this kind of work, and how are you getting on?
So this is really interesting because my entry to it was totally accidental. My pain started 32 years ago, 33 years this year, actually. So I was ever so young when that happened. And it was just a shock to the system, really. It started with sciatica, which was intermittent. And then I started to get it in both legs at the same time. Doctor just said, that's something old people get. And when you're 18, that's not the kind of thing you want to hear, really, not the right words. And I was just given ibuprofen. And I think as well at the time, I was a very naive, young 18-year-old. We didn't have social media. We were just sheltered from a lot of life and things going on in the world. And I just wasn't very confident. I believed what the doctor said. It was just take these pills, it'll go away. That was the fix. And it didn't. And it got worse and worse and worse. And it's really, I love all this kind of reflection really on the journey and what happened. And now I'm able to make things make sense. I carried on working. I just had an office job. And I carried on working because I had to. I had to earn a living. It didn't even enter my head that I was disabled or that I couldn't work or I wouldn't work or and that's been the story throughout all of my life. I've carried on working all the time. And I think in the circumstances, when I look back now, it's unbelievable, really. I could have easily just said, no, I'm not able to walk because I couldn't barely walk. But I did. I carried on working. And I think even though it sounds very, fantastic of me and very noble of me to carry on working and push through. And a lot of that was pushing through the pain. That wasn't necessarily a good thing. I know that now. So when the tablets weren't working, the ibuprofen wore off quite quickly. It just wasn't doing anything. I saw an osteopath, I saw a chiropractor, friends and family like, oh, I need to see somebody for my back. This person will fix you. I had Alexander technique, which I found very interesting at the time. I had reflexology. I started looking into alternative therapies because that's what people called them back then. And I think the big thing here as well, the internet wasn't around. There was no internet. So there was no, oh, I'll Google this. There was nothing at all. And I think what builds resilience as well is quite an eye-opener because I had to back then. I had to be resilient. I didn't know I was being resilient. I had no awareness at all because I had no choice. I felt I had no choice. So the pain from the sciatica, like I said, it was constant. So what I mean by constant is literally there all the time, every second of every day, even when resting. And I started to experience other pains, which were muscular in nature. So this was in my lower back. I would get muscle spasms, and they're definitely spasms that were in my buttock muscles, in my groin, different sensations of pain in my legs, in my thighs, upper thighs, because the sciatica used to be, it started going down to the bottom of my leg, but then it just seemed to be in my thigh, didn't go any further. So the pain changed quite a lot, and the intensity changed from day to day, even hour to hour. Like I said, it didn't enter my head to even get any walking aids. I just didn't, because I didn't consider myself disabled. Nobody was telling me I was disabled. And I went back to the doctor a few times. I think I was put on codeine, prescription codeine. That was probably the strongest meds I was ever given. Unbelievably, I actually moved. I live in Bristol and I moved to London. So even with all this pain going on, I managed to move. I didn't, looking back now, I don't know how I did it, to be honest with you. And I've had a lot of jobs in my time as well, just sort of flitted from one job to another, and I temped quite a lot. So there's been a few moments that stand out in my journey, which some of the most painful moments that has kind of helped me develop the awareness and to the point of recovery that I've got to. One thing was, my mum once said to me when I was in the kitchen and I had a really bad moment where I was just stuck to the spot. The pain was so bad. She said to me, sometimes I think it's all in your head. And that upset me so much. But then in the coming years, she actually wasn't wrong. And that was quite a realization when I looked back and thought about that. So, and another moment, the pain was so bad, I nearly passed out once with just my sister in the house, and that was really scary, really, really scary to actually faint, almost faint. I didn't, but I almost fainted. I have a very high pain threshold. That was a very scary time. And then I think the third kind of defining moment was when I made a decision. I made a decision that because I had a lot of dark times with the pain, it affects everything in your life, your relationships, your job, conversations you have with people, especially when there was no knowledge about this in the public domain. I had people didn't believe me, even family. Friends have always stuck by me. I'm very lucky, but family, people that were very close to me, jobs, I've lost countless jobs because I couldn't be a guaranteed bum on a seat, as it were. And you know, that's quite traumatic and quite upsetting to go through those experiences. So I had a defining moment during the worst of my pain, probably quite early on, actually. A lot of my memory has faded, unfortunately, because it was so long ago, but I made a decision, and it was one of two things. I could either end up in a wheelchair, because that's genuinely how I felt my life would go, the direction my life would go in, or I could get well. That was my choices. And because nobody, when I was going to doctors, and I have seen various consultants and people over the years, I was even told at one point that I may have had rheumatoid arthritis, but nobody could prove it to me 100%. So I was like, well, I haven't then. And you kind of know, in your body, you can feel it in your body. And I just thought, no, if people are saying there's nothing wrong with me when I'm in the most excruciating pain, then I'll prove it. I'll prove it to myself and I'll get well. That was my choice. It was that or end up in a wheelchair. And I think the fact that I've got a good family and supportive network, and I didn't want to be a burden to my family. I think that's what drove me really to make that decision, because I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to be the person that as I got older, that I could care for my family. I didn't want my family to care for me. I mean, it's quite emotional. It's a really emotional thing to think about, really. I didn't want to put them in that decision, in that position, and I was so determined, and that was my motivation for thinking, right, if there's nothing wrong with me, you know what, I'm going to go and prove it then. That was my motivator to do that. So, like I said, I was in London actually at the time, and I'd been to see a few specialists. I even went to Harley Street. I thought, if somebody, I was earning next to no money, if somebody on Harley Street couldn't fix me, then nobody could. And I was recommended, somebody I work with said, oh, I know this posture and gait specialist on Harley Street. And I just thought, right, well, this is it. You know, if this guy doesn't fix me, then there's just no hope. Guess what? He didn't fix me, which was quite funny, really. Horrendously expensive. This was a long time ago, but it was still horrendously expensive to see him. And I saw him twice. He watched me walk on a treadmill, gave me shoe lifts to put in my shoe. So that was quite interesting. And I didn't really understand why. So that kind of started my journey, and I started to notice things like and reading things. The internet came along at some point during this time as well, and obviously I started to look at things that were on the internet, which was interesting because there's a lot of conflicting information on the internet. And I started looking at, I think the way that I naturally gravitated, as I think anybody would with any kind of pain or something happening to their body, is it's physical. It's a physical problem. It has to be a physical problem. Like I said, I'd seen chiropractors, osteopaths, physios, funnily enough, who just did a bit of manual therapy. Sometimes I had a little bit of relief, like from the muscular relief. Other times it actually made it worse. I know why now. And nobody could tell me what it was. I never had a formal diagnosis. So I started to look at my physical body and what might have been happening. And I must have been reading, as you do, and reading things about posture. And I know posture is a very quite an interesting subject as well for physios. And over the years, I think the stance on posture has changed quite a lot too. So I did a lot of just looking at myself. And the first thing that happened, I was in London, and I used to be really physically active up until my pain started, running and playing ball sports and stuff like that. All that stopped. And basically for 10 years, a good 10 years, I did none of that at all, nothing. I could barely walk, let alone do anything else. So I thought, okay, let's just be brave and let's see if a exercise class or something might help. And I think yoga was big at the time and things like that. And I thought, I'll try Pilates, because there's a lot of stuff around about the core, you know, strengthening your core, back pain, things like that. So I tried Pilates and I started going regularly to a class. And it was only when we were in the class that I caught sight of myself in like, it was just glass panels at the side of the wall. And the teacher was telling us to stand in a certain way. And I glanced across like that. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not doing what she's saying, but it feels like I'm doing what she's saying. Hang on a second. I need to look again. Looked again, put myself in the position that she was saying we should be in and showing us. And I thought, this feels so wrong. So wrong. So something started to happen up there. I thought, this is really weird. I don't understand. So obviously kept going back and learning. And then because I had this feeling of what I think I'm doing isn't what I'm being instructed to do, and when I do put myself in that position, it doesn't feel right. What the hell's going on with my body? What is happening? It was just bizarre. So that really sparked my interest in, right, this is the cause of my pain. I thought I'd hit the jackpot, that the way I was moving, my physical body, and I assumed, I didn't talk to anybody, I just assumed that I'd overcompensated, that the pain had caused overcompensation, and overcompensation was then driving the pain. So I was stuck in that cycle. That's how I had it in my head. And I was stuck in that cycle for a long time, actually. I'd probably say another 10 years, if not more. Always chasing a physical causation because it had to be. I gravitated to yoga after that and found that I really enjoyed that. I actually did enjoy a lot of aspects about yoga. When I started to do these movements, that's when the pain, I started to get some relief. So to me, that relief means a reduction in the intensity of the sensations I was feeling. And it started off really gradually. So it was minutes, then it went to a few more minutes, then it was hour, few hours. And I was absolutely convinced that I'd hit the jackpot. This is it. I have to work on my posture because all these things are working. I'm actually having pain reduction. And that pain reduction, eventually, I don't know after how long, but I had pain-free episodes as well. I was still looking into kind of alternative therapies and sort of yoga. I did a deep stretching thing in London that's called Method Pukisto. And that was very interesting. It wasn't yoga, but it was about stretching the muscles to their limit, if you like, by imagining weight going into the muscle and then using the breath to stretch that muscle to its limits. And I had more relief from doing that as well. So I was just convinced this is it. It's all about stretching and it's all about looking at my posture. So I carried on with the yoga. I actually moved back to Bristol as well in 2004. So managed to come back and carried on the yoga when I came here, and all the things that go with yoga, with breathing. I enjoyed all the breathing techniques and things like that. What had happened whilst I was in London and when I came back, and it happened quite subtly. When I saw the guy in Harley Street about the posture, the reason he gave me the heel lift was because there was quite a significant change in my leg length that I'd never seen before or noticed. But when I was wearing sort of jeans and trousers and things, one of the legs was scraping along the floor. It was really, really bizarre. And I thought, have I always been like this? Because surely it would have happened previously. But I couldn't make sense of that at all. I had no idea what was happening. So I did wear that heel lift for quite a long time to level me up. But it became apparent when I said I was looking into my posture, and then I found myself seeing myself in reflections. When I was doing yoga, I could watch myself in a mirror in a studio, which I hadn't had before. And that was another big revelation of, oh my goodness, my spatial awareness and what I'm doing with my body is just totally gone. It shocked me actually how, when I thought I was in the right positions, and when I looked at myself, I so wasn't. And one side seemed to be worse than the other. So there was obviously something going on. And with the leg length difference, I think I do remember an occasion when I asked my dad to take a photo of me kind of stood in my underwear because I wanted to see what my body was doing. So I just stood without thinking about any kind of posture. And what was happening was that my right hip was up a lot higher than my left, and it was also twisted slightly round to the right. I'd had an X-ray years before that where they said I had a slight scoliosis as well in the spine, but higher up, which I now think that was just due to overcompensation, because I think the pain was so intense, my body was compensating, was trying to compensate totally. I mean, it's amazing. It fascinates me when I think about it, that my body is saying, don't use that bit because it's going to hurt if you do. But I wasn't aware of it. I had no awareness. It's like it was doing its own thing to protect itself. And this went on for years and years and years. So when my dad took that photo, I was just like, oh my gosh. And that posture felt normal to me. That felt so normal. So when I stood in a mirror And I corrected myself. No, it just felt like I was all over the shop. But I just thought, I have to do this. I have to do this. And another key moment around the posture, it's hilarious, really. I was on holiday, walking down the beach in a bikini, and I just happened to just glance down. And as I was walking, my belly button was turning just to one side and not the other side. It was just bizarre. You had to be there to believe it. And I was like, it was like two different people. I was walking along the beach, looking down, going, "What? What's that about?" It was so strange. So I consciously moved the other side so that my belly button moved. And again, wrong, just felt so wrong. I thought that this is just nuts, but I have to do this because I was born as an able-bodied person and everything works properly. This is a posture that's been adopted through pain. So I need to reverse that and go back to the body I was born with and a body that moves in the way that it should. So that was it then. That was my mission, was to correct my posture. I looked into various things. There's something called the Go Clay method, which is all posture based. There's some good stuff in it. There is good stuff in it. I see where it's coming from. But I was just like, I was so immersed in it. Posture was the thing. But it was working. This is the thing. This is the thing. As I started to correct this, I was starting to move again. I was doing the stretching. I also found out by the help of the internet at that time as well that I had things called trigger points in my muscles. Nobody had ever said that word to me before. I think I found it out from there was a guy, I think he was in New Zealand. There's a couple actually. One guy that was in New Zealand. He had a program called the X Pain Project, and I joined that. And I learned loads about posture and stuff on that, which and trigger points, which I'd never heard of. Jonathan Kuttner in New Zealand, he's got did have a fantastic website, lots of YouTube videos and things all about trigger points. So this was kind of, I think my journey has been one of, finding something, plateauing, finding something else, plateauing again, finding something else. So that's where I got to with that. When I found trigger points, that was a new kettle of fish. It was like, right, we've got the posture thing. Now we've got the trigger points. All physical. All, as far as I was concerned, everything was physical. So I started treating trigger points when I was looking on the internet now and finding out about trigger points. I understood what they were, how to treat them. I found out how painful they were. When I found that they referred the pain, oh my God, it opened up a brand new world. Because that's what I had. I basically had primary, secondary, and satellite trigger points all firing at once when I had the most tremendous pain. So suddenly, like, all the dots were beginning to join. This is why I'm hurting. And I plateaued for a long time on that with trigger points and the posture, because then I started thinking, well, okay, I found all this stuff, but why am I still not getting well? Why am I still not getting well? So what happened with the pain then? So I was having pain-free moments, hours, days. It manifested itself into I will say flare-ups because people are familiar with that. I prefer to call it setbacks now, and have these setbacks, and I didn't know why. And I think you get into a situation where I wasn't aware of it, but where the fear comes in, and the fear comes into, okay, so I'm getting well, but I don't know when I'm going to be unwell. And I don't know if there's any specific things that will cause it. And of course, in life, when you have these conditions and you've got your family to deal with and friends, if I had pain for whatever reason, which I didn't know, your family or a friend would say to you, well, why did you do that? Why, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Maybe that's not a good idea if you do that. So people are feeding you this information to say, well, you're overdoing it. Stop overdoing it. I thought, well, I don't know if I'm overdoing it. I don't know. Just because you're saying I'm overdoing it, then you start to believe that. So you think, well, am I overdoing it? And what's overdoing it? Like, what's the boundaries? At what point do I stop? Do I even start? Whatever it might be. So there's all this complexity around it that you still don't understand whilst you're trying to live your life, and other people are feeding you this information, and it gets really confusing. So for me to try and help other people to help me was really hard because I didn't understand myself. And like, people, they don't give you the slack because of that. So even though there was stuff coming out on the internet about it, which was fantastic because that was my support, I still wasn't getting any support from the system as such. I think I'd got to the point where even when I was in London, and I lived in Brighton as well, I'd go to see doctors, nothing wrong with you. I wasn't in the system. I took myself out the system because I remember seeing a doctor once and it just upset me. I just went home and cried because I just thought, there's nobody that can help me. The only person that can help me is me. I'm not going to be in the system to keep, when nobody is helping me, that's making me feel so upset. I cannot put myself in that position. So when I'm starting to get well, I thought, things change, knowledge changes. I can see stuff happening on the internet. I'll go back to the doctor and just see what's going on. Is there anything new that they can offer me that I haven't had already? And it was partially successful. I ended up, a doctor said to me something about the pain clinic. And I said, pardon, pain clinic? Hello? Nobody had mentioned a pain clinic to me before. I was actually really angry that, why did it take a conversation from me for them to say, oh, well, yes, there's the pain clinic. How are you supposed to know these things? So I was like, yes, sign me up to the pain clinic, please. And I think by that stage, because I'd learned so much about myself and the pain, I didn't know what was setting the trigger points off. That was ultimately I say the cause of my pain. It wasn't. That's what was giving me the pain, was the trigger points. So when I got to the pain clinic, and we did sort of 7 weeks of pacing, which I'm not going to knock because there's a place for pacing, absolute place for pacing. I wasn't really taking meds at this time either, because after a while, even with the setbacks, the codeine started to disagree with me big time. And I just thought, no, I cannot take this. And I'd come to learn that for the type of pain that I had with trigger points, ibuprofen wouldn't work. Ibuprofen's inflammation. I didn't have inflammation. I had trigger points. It's not inflammation. Not going to work. So I wasn't even on meds or anything when I had pain setbacks. So the pacing was great because what it actually did, for the first time in my life, I was in a group. I was actually in a group with other people that had pain. I'd never been with other people that had pain. And actually, it makes me smile thinking about it because it was amazing. It was so good to just be with other people, because up till that point, it had felt so lonely. It was just me. I didn't know or come across anybody that had anything like the same symptoms as me. So it's a really lonely place. So to suddenly have all these people, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone anymore. This is brilliant. And I think because I'd learned so much already myself, it didn't really tell me that much that I didn't know. And what it actually did was it validated what I'd been doing. It was just that validation of me getting well by myself without any knowledge. I was just doing what I thought was the best things for me. To have that in some form of validation was like, wow, I've been doing it right, and I am doing it right. That's just incredible. So it wasn't wasted on me at all, because there's just little nuggets of things. And I think that's what helped me get to that point. Even things like the osteopath and the chiropractor and the physios, I took something away from it. I was interested in what was happening, whether it benefited me, why it might have benefited me, and why not. And I didn't always have the answer at all. But I was always questioning and then thinking, well, like the Alexander technique, like the Go clay, like the method Pukister, why have all these things begun to help me? So they were like my pieces of the jigsaw that I was beginning to build. So there was kind of a pathway, kind of a understanding, but kind of not. So I was glad that I got to the point where I had, because it was beginning to make sense, and the pain clinic was helping me to make sense of what was going on. So the pacing, as I learned and looking back, was just one part of the big story, which I didn't know at the time. But it was great. And I thought, okay, so I'm doing this already, but I'm still not pain free. And that was my ultimate goal. I think that's really important to say that, really. You know, my ultimate goal was to get well. Getting well means no pain. So I thought, well, I'm still not well. So that, you know, there's still stuff going on. And the problem with the pain clinic back then, which was about 2006, 7, they just discharged you and that was it. So, oh, okay. So kind of carried on as I was going, as I'd been for many years, still not really finding anything else. Went back to the doctor again, you know, can I go back to the pain clinic, or, you know, let's see what's happened. Has anything changed? He referred me there to see a consultant. I don't know what he's a consultant in. Oh, I think somebody had told me at work, or somebody had said something about trigger point injections. And I was like, trigger point injections. Got really excited about like the next thing. That would be great. Let me have trigger point injections. Went to talk to him about that. And he's probably the one, not the one and only, but because I've only had a few really that have been that helpful, where he listened. He listened. And at that time, he said the most wonderful things, which was about how well I'd done to get to where I was. Nobody had said that before. And I hadn't really recognized it myself, because I don't, because I have all those classic personality traits that chronic pain people have. And I was like, wow. So he said to me, so I'm going to recommend that you have CBT. And I thought, CBT, isn't that for people that have got quite like serious mental health problems? I thought, that's not me. But you know what? I'm open to anything and everything. And again, I think that's a big part of getting well, is being open and accepting of trying all these things, even if they don't work. If you don't have that open mind, it's kind of, you know, the difference between the open mindset and the closed mindset, really. So I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So referred me. And when I got the letter, I got a couple of letters through, and I was seeing 2 people, which maybe I misunderstood in the meeting. So I was seeing one psychologist for pain CBT, and I was seeing another physio psychologist. And I didn't really know what that was about. I thought, okay, well, we'll go anyway. And oh my gosh, it was absolutely incredible. The pain physio, she was just brilliant to help bring awareness to things like thoughts. Was completely off my radar. Wouldn't have had a clue. And I was still very, very posture driven at this point. That's where my head was still in the posture stuff and treating trigger points. So when I saw the physio psychologist, he was great too. And again, he listened, understood where I'd got to in my journey. And I told him about all the posture stuff, and that, you know, this is the answer, it's posture. And he was like, yeah, you know, it's kind of, you know, there's something in it, but these people are going to say this because blah, 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 blah. And I was a bit like, oh, okay, right. So I don't really get where you're coming from, but open to continuing with the treatment. What he identified in me, which again, I hadn't noticed at all, hadn't made any correlation with, was the boom and bust cycle. He was able, the way he explained it to me, and it stayed with me all these years, was one minute I was up there and the next minute I was down there. And he said, what we need to do is do that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. How are you going to do that then? And then with the other psychologist, when we were talking about the thought patterns and then habits, and then we were talking about physical habits, then you've just got the thinking habits. I just found that absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And then trying to understand how to work with that and the impact that it could have. I was just so up for it. I thought this is just absolutely amazing. And that's what helped me like bring awareness to things, and then made me realize how much of life is on automatic pilot. And I think a few things have come out during this time with me, which again is common traits. If I do something, I'll do it 100 miles an hour. And kind of my boundaries, I go beyond a boundary, really. So the physiopsychologist was great. He was like, yeah, you just foot off the gas a little bit. You know, it's great that you're understanding it, but just pull it back, just rein things in a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't get that. And I think what sticks in my mind is because I carried on doing my yoga practice and stuff. And one of the Go Clay teachers, which is in Bristol, he was also a yoga teacher. And we got on very, very well. And he got to know me quite well. And he said, the one thing that he said about me, and this will always stick with me as well, is you're very gung-ho. So I don't go into things like really gently, and it's got to be like when I'm watching a teacher and then I'm applying the things to myself, it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. And obviously perfectionism is a very, very common trait, and I basically fit all of that mold, but I didn't realize at the time. So again, the internet comes in here because more information was coming out on the internet as well. I'd followed a guy in, I think he's Canadian, Paul Ingraham. He had a really good, he's changed the name of the site now. It's called Pain Science. He's a scientific writer. He's also has his own pain, or had it. He was brilliant. Really highly recommend his papers. They're just for lay people, and he's very funny, and he brings his own experiences and his own opinions, so not even necessarily the science, and then he tries to make sense of it with the science and the logic. And I remember reading something about neural pathways, like ages, and it was probably a good couple of years until it came up again somewhere. I'm trying to think where. It might have been with Jonathan Kuttner, when I joined a program of his as well. And I thought, I've seen this before. I've seen it was neuroplasticity. I've seen that word. What does that mean? I thought, I'm really interested in this now. So suddenly that's where the internet came into its own. And I was able to read about what neuroplasticity was, and how all of the thought patterns and then the feelings and then the emotions can influence pain. It was a bit of a sort of throwaway thing when I first read it. I was like, oh, all right, okay, well, it was interesting. And then when I began to look into it even more, that's when, and especially with the physiopsychologist as well, when he was just like, it's not all about posture. And I was like, isn't it? That was another piece of the jigsaw puzzle beginning to fit into place. Because then I thought I changed tack completely then from the physical body, although I do still stick by, for me, because it's a very individual experience, as we know, with pain. I think because my body overcompensated so much, I think for me, correcting that was important. I couldn't have carried on walking and moving the way that I was. I still think that would have influenced some form of pain somewhere if I didn't look at addressing that. So I don't think personally that I would ever dismiss posture at all in people with pain. I think there's a place for it somewhere. And I think there was for me. So I'm quite glad that I did the work on the posture and then moved on to what was happening up here. And that's when it got really, really interesting, really interesting. So yeah, that's basically the internet then was fantastic. So I joined Jonathan Kuttner's program. Somebody then told me about Curable, so I joined Curable. I've kind of done, I think it's quite ironic really, because I've joined anything and everything sort of pain stuff, and you've got to be very careful on the internet as well, because there's a place where people just moan about their pain, and that's not where I wanted to be. It was more about positive experiences, and because when I was learning this stuff and I was still having the setbacks, I was still on this journey of working out why this was happening. Over a period of time, I realized that there were two things that were driving my pain. One was, this is how I looked at it then. One was exercise, and the second one was stress, particularly at work. As I began to learn more about the way that the brain perceives situations, the more that changed, because it wasn't work and it wasn't exercise. It was what the brain was perceiving to be danger. And I think when I found, via all these courses and all the stuff on the internet, that, you know, one of the biggest drivers is fear, I've been able to do loads of reflection to understand how I addressed fear. Because, you know, I said earlier on about I didn't know when I'd get my pain. Well, there's fear around that, because then you think, well, should I do that? Because I might get pain. You know, shouldn't I do that? Or somebody's saying, don't overdo it, or I shall get pain. And that's fear. You know, that's classic fear. So as I kind of learned more and implemented it, that fear went. So I could look back and identify and think, well, I'm not frightened of that anymore. The same as I learned that pain is a sensation. It's not frightening. It's just a sensation. It's like, oh, all the work with the psychologists, it reframes things. It helps you to reframe situations. It helps you to reframe the way you think about the pain and the feelings and all the sensations. So suddenly, you know, what started out as being massive fear, it wasn't anymore. So I thought, well, I don't, you know, this isn't about fearing things. It's like, I don't fear exercise. I want to be able to do loads of exercise. The work stress was a bit different. What I had to try and figure out was what was happening, and what was happening was that I was catastrophizing. And I think when you look on the internet about pain and catastrophizing, it's mainly about catastrophizing about the pain. I didn't do that. I didn't catastrophize about the pain. I catastrophized about situations. And when I did all the work with a psychologist, I discovered that I was a warrior. And if you asked any of my friends and family, they would have said I was not a warrior, because my perception is quite calm. I mean, I get angry and I've got principles and I'll say them and things and get upset over stuff, but nobody would ever put me down as a sort of a real warrior. And I've learned a lot about myself. And I think I think in order to dig down and unpick all of this, some people will have to unpick more than others, but for me, I've had to unpick a lot to find out that I'm a warrior about things. So like in my job, and it is just a job, because I think pain sort of put any kind of career aspirations on hold. But it's funny, I don't have any regrets really, because I don't know if I ever would have achieved what I wanted to do. So there's no point thinking about it ruined what I wanted to do, because I'll never know. So there's, you know, not even worth considering really. So I've been left with sort of just doing a job. But I tend to care about what I do. And because I'm a perfectionist, I know it's not helpful, but it's quite difficult to get over perfectionism or deal with it in successful ways. And I worry that if I don't do something right, then somebody will criticize me. And if they criticize me, then I'm going to beat myself up. Another trait. I procrastinate over things. So I think, well, if I don't do this, then this might happen. And if that happens, then that's going to happen. And catastrophization. That's what I do. And I still struggle with that today. But they were the two things that would set off a pain setback. So I now had a really clear vision of why these things were happening, and potentially still do. It's got better. But that was great, because I now knew, I had these things. It was like, right, now I know what I'm working with, and try to do the things to get there. And I've plateaued again for quite a long time in that situation, while still doing all the pain stuff online and all the different groups that I belong to, and doing things like this, which I love doing. So last year, an opportunity came up on one of the Facebook groups that I'm in, to work with a lady who had just qualified as a PRT, pain reprocessing therapist. And I'd heard about this. It's another one of those things. I think I'm involved in so many things online. I'd heard about PRT somewhere or other, didn't really know much about it, didn't look into it again. Saw this and I thought, I don't know, I feel like I've heard about that somewhere. Okay, this sounds interesting. And she just wanted volunteers to help. And I thought, okay, let's give it a go. Why not? Something else. Might learn something, might not. So I had 4 sessions with her that started last November. And we went into just before Christmas was the last one. And I'm continuing those sessions with her because she was able to recommend Unlearn Pain. I think it's Howard Schubiner, isn't it? Yeah. And to have a look at that and to read that. I hadn't read it. I've got a stack of pain books, but that wasn't one of them. But I thought, right, let's do this because I'm working with her on PRT. Started reading that, haven't finished it yet, but I'm about 200 pages from the end, I think. And it was like, whoa, this is something else. I'd looked into trauma because I'd come across trauma as well. And I found that quite interesting. And, you immediately think with trauma, oh my God, it's massive. You got to have a massive life event to be a trauma. And actually, when you look into it, it's not. And when I started working with the therapist for PRT, that's what we've been able to understand as being the potential triggers that have been driving my pain. And I think she's right. So what I'm doing at the moment, so the stage I'm at the moment, is I am writing letters. So I've written a big long list of about 32 things, and I've actually thought of some more that I can add on if they're not there already, of things which have caused me negative emotions in my life, no matter how small or large it is. It's things that I could probably put myself back there and still feel all those same things. And even though I understood what I had to do, I thought, this is really weird, writing letters, and then I have to write a letter back from the people or whatever it is that might have caused some upset. But I've started doing it. I'm about halfway in. And I think what I'm finding out at the moment, I'm having some quite stressful issues at work. And I'm well. I'm okay. I'm doing all right. I go out walking every day, like power walking. I do yoga a couple of times a week. That's about it at the moment. I'm still staying within those safe boundaries at the moment. But I've had some really emotional situations at work and other stuff going on in life, and parents to deal with. My parents live with me, so we've got all that stress going on all the time. Other family stuff and just life, but I'm okay. So I'm carry on writing at the moment. And I'm finding it interesting because I'm reliving those experiences, and it's not very nice. It's not a pleasant feeling to be doing it, but it's giving me an opportunity to just say to these people in writing exactly how I feel or how they made me feel, and how I felt about it and how I felt about it then, whether I was a child. It's stuff when I was a child and stuff as an adult, current stuff, old stuff. And it's like the trigger stacking, the stuff that's happening at work. I suddenly thought the other day, let me write this down. Let me do some free writing. Let me just put it down and get it out, how it's making me feel at this moment in time. Even though there's not a resolution, let's get it out, because the understanding from the therapist is that all of these things are triggers. They've stacked up and stacked up and stacked up. So I'm knocking them down at the moment. So when a new trigger comes, which is the work stuff, let's just get rid straight away. Let's write it down and help me cope and deal with it. And I'm really, really surprised with what's going on that I'm well. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is this working? Is this actually working? Because it's still really new to me. And I think that during my whole journey as well, when I've been getting well, I kind of don't believe that what I've done is the reason for why I've been getting well. My belief's terrible in myself, and lack of self-confidence. And again, all those typical fits the mold, I do fit the mold 100%. That I kind of think this is just coincidence. It has to be coincidence. But I'm coming around to the fact that no, actually, maybe all this work that I'm putting in, this is actually making a big difference. So I'm carrying on doing it, and I'm still having the therapy. I've got another session next week, but I actually think this is the end. This is the end of the journey. This now is the cherry on the cake. When I work through this process, and then I've got those tools and those skills to go forward to stop those triggers stacking, and I understand the power of the emotions that have caused the attachments, those cues in the brain to the situations, the life situations where those emotions occur. I can just see the whole picture now. I can reflect back and see exactly why my pain became the way it did, and why it manifested in the way it did. And now this unpicking, and yeah, I'm 33 years in this year. That's not going to be the case for other people. It might be longer, it might be, it doesn't actually matter. What matters is doing the work, not setting the deadlines, not having the pressure of deadlines and things. It will take as long as it takes, but when you're armed with all that information, it's amazing, because I know what I'm working with, and nobody can tell me otherwise, because I'm now the expert in this. It's my journey. I've learned most of it myself, and I've pieced it all together myself. And obviously with the help sort of with yourself as well, which I find, it's great. It's great to be part of a community like this as well. And validation for everything that I've done and I still am doing. And it's still my goal is still to be 100% pain-free and be able to do all the exercise in the world and all the life stress, and I'll be pain-free. And I will keep going until that happens, no doubt about it. And I believe I'll get there. So that's it in a nutshell, really. Only took an hour.
It's a really wonderful story. It really is. And it's such a common theme. Everyone has different patterns in one thing or another, but this hook into the physical element is human. We've got to look for the physical element for our pain in the moment we feel it. If we didn't, someone would be chewing on our leg, So you've got to check out. Unfortunately, you describe a culture where nobody looked anywhere else other than, is there anything chewing on your leg? And let's look inside, anything chewing on your leg from the inside out. And if there wasn't, go chew on your own leg, because we can't help you. So, and unfortunately, that lasted a long time. And then you think, oh, well, I'll make whatever corrections I can. And you describe the progression, and they are absolutely relevant, because you're attending to yourself, and using the body to attend to yourself and to symbolize that will make changes for people. It just, on its own, it's short. It could be short-lived, because there needs to be those. Think of a child in pain, physical pain, emotional pain. They're thinking it's the end of the world. They're physically very guarded. They're holding the breath or breathing really fast, and the emotional state is fear. If you just tell them, oh, you'll be fine, it's not enough. Yeah, you'll be fine, and this is what we're going to do. Take a deep breath. We're going to move your arm a little bit, and the fear you've got is totally understandable, but I love you. You're going to be okay. Let's get back on the bike. Or sticks and stones, if there's no physical injury, it's the same process. Calm words. Hug if it's emotional connection that's needed, or visual connection. It's regulate the breath in exactly the same way, and make the person feel safe, and get them back playing with their friends and say nice words, and ask the other people involved to say nice words too. So they're very quick 4-category integrations that happen like that, but that process doesn't happen with persistent pain. Doesn't happen for whatever reason. The people aren't there to help bring them down. The people who are there maybe are the aggressors or the stressors. The child has no other option other than to hold on to the situation, stay in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. As you know, that becomes a coping strategy long after the stress was there. It becomes a personality trait, and then it becomes something to use in life to survive. Yes, you can get paid for it and approved and survive, and it's just a very expensive way, as the other person said, is boom and then bust. And the body regulates that behavior by just bringing out pain, a spasm, a disease process, or a symptom that temporarily stops the person. So you've almost done it piecemeal per decade.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter at all. You're absolutely right, because the information you have now is totally liberating. You're amazing to have done it yourself, and you acknowledge the help you've had off different people, but really they simply confirmed what you felt within, but they've helped you articulate it in ways you might have seen some of the things and maybe didn't see others, but you do not need to know anything else.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing, really. It really is. There's been, and I know that obviously it works differently for different people. And there's, I can look at things now and think, well, would I have done things differently if I had all this information given to me? I don't know. I'm not able to put myself in that position. And I think also there's a place for, you might visit one tool one day and not use it for 2 years, but when you come back to it, it works. So the timing for there's, to say that this is what you should try in this order, no, it doesn't work like that at all. There's nothing wrong with revisiting these things at another point in time. And also just having that acceptance of, didn't work this time, but hey, it's fine. Let's go away. We'll do something different, and then come back to that another time, because you could well be in a different place, and then you'll be more accepting of that thing, and it will suddenly click and make sense. So it's really difficult and challenging to, especially when you're doing it on your own with very little support, to navigate all these things. And of course, the internet was full of all this stuff. And I thought, but I don't know where to go next. Nobody says do this next. So it was all my decisions based on what I thought was the best thing for me at that time. And then by accident, kind of thinking, well, actually, that didn't work now, but that's all right. I'll go and do that. And then later on, I think, oh, what about that thing? Let's go back and see that again. And suddenly it made sense.
It
And
sometimes slots in at different times, doesn't it?
even things like end of last year, when I went back to the pain clinic, I did self-compassion. They sent me on a self-compassion group therapy course. Amazing. Why didn't I know about that before then? Why didn't I know that self-compassion was so huge and that I needed loads of it? I know that now. Everything that I find that maybe I haven't looked at before in much detail or much depth, and I find it and suddenly it clicks. It's a real revelation, and it's wonderful because it's something else that I can use. The same as, breath work. I do loads of breath meditation. My life would be nothing without meditation now. Understanding the calming of the nervous system. These things are so important. They are so important. And when you do it and you realize that it works, and you can do that self-reflection, and you have that awareness, all these things are skills, and it's just got to be work. It's a work in practice. It's not a do and it's done. It's a work in practice. It's part of life.
We should teach it in school, shouldn't we?
Yes.
One day, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate how you presented it really articulately. You took us through all the stages, and it being in the time that you began to suffer, there was no resources. You're adding something really rich to somebody who may not have to struggle as long as you had to, just with this interview. It's such a lovely thing to share, and you've been very frank, very honest, and you are amazing. You've done amazing, and I wish you loads more success in the rest of your recovery.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to continue. This isn't the end. So still work to do, but I'm willing to do it to get there. So.